Hello everyone. My name is Miguel, and I am 45 years old. I grew up in a small rural town called San Juan de las Montañas in Oaxaca, Mexico. My grandfather used to tell me stories about the creatures and spirits that roamed around our ranch when I was a child. Among all of them, the story of the Chupacabras was the most terrifying and stuck in my mind the most. Life in San Juan de las Montañas was peaceful but full of challenges. Dense vegetation and mountains, seemingly hiding ancient secrets, surrounded our ranch. My siblings and I spent our days helping our parents with daily tasks, from tending the livestock to harvesting crops. Although the work was hard, we always found time to listen to the fascinating and sometimes chilling stories that our grandfather shared with us as night fell. One particular night, as the wind blew strongly and the full moon lit up the sky, my grandfather called us around the fire. His face, illuminated by the dancing flames, bore a serious expression. "Tonight, I will tell you about the Chupacabras," he said gravely. We moved closer, curious and a little scared, ready to listen to one of his most terrifying tales. My grandfather began to describe the Chupacabras as a creature half-man, half-beast that attacked livestock and drained their blood. He recounted incidents of sightings in the region and the transmission of local legends from one generation to the next. Although we tried not to take these stories too seriously, we couldn't help but feel a chill every time we heard them. My grandfather, Don Manuel, was a wise man full of stories. Every night after dinner, we would sit around the fire to listen to his tales. He spoke to us of ancient times, of earth guardians, spirits, and creatures that roamed in the darkness. But among all his stories, the Chupacabras always stood out for their intensity and terror. According to my grandfather, the Chupacabras appeared on the darkest nights, especially when the moon was full. His description was vivid. A creature with a frightening appearance, bright eyes and sharp teeth, moving silently through the countryside, looking for its next victim. "It is not a myth," he used to say firmly. "Many have seen this creature and suffered its attacks." He told us that the Chupacabras mainly attacked livestock, leaving the animals completely drained of blood with 2 small marks on their necks. "Those marks are the Chupacabra's signature," my grandfather said, as we shivered at the thought of the creature lurking in the darkness. He warned us never to go out alone at night, and to always be aware of any sign of danger. Although we tried not to show fear, my grandfather's stories stayed with us, especially on nights when the sounds of the countryside became more intense. The creaking of branches, the howling wind, and the whispers of the trees seemed to come to life, feeding our nightmares. We knew that, although they were just stories, there was something in them that kept us alert and reminded us of the presence of the inexplicable. One morning, we woke up to find one of our goats dead in the corral. There were no signs of conflict or visible predators. Examining the body, we discovered 2 small punctures on the goat's neck and found its body completely drained of blood. I remembered my grandfather's stories, and a deep fear began to grow within me. Although we tried to stay calm, everyone in the family felt a mix of fear and curiosity about what had happened. My father, always pragmatic, tried to find a logical explanation. "It must have been some wild animal," he said, though his voice did not hide the concern. We decided that we would watch the corral that night to try to discover what had killed our goat. The idea of staying up all night filled us with fear, but we knew it was necessary. We couldn't allow something to continue attacking our livestock. That night, armed with lanterns and an old rifle, we took turns watching the corral. The air was cold, and the silence was almost deafening. Every creak and movement made us jump, and the fear of the unknown grew with each passing minute. We felt that the Chupacabra's eyes could be on us at any moment. The wait was endless, and although we saw nothing that night, the feeling of imminent danger did not leave us. The next morning, upon inspection of the corral, we found no signs of the attacker. However, the fact that we had not seen anything only increased our fear. The memory of my grandfather's stories was always present, and we began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, there was some truth to them. We decided that we had to keep watching and be more alert to any signs of danger. We decided to investigate further. My father and I began to inspect the area around the corral, looking for any clues that might explain what had happened. We found some strange tracks on the ground, but nothing that could give us a clear answer. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and a sense of imminent danger surrounded us. Every detail became important, and our senses were on high alert. The tracks we found were unlike anything we had seen before. They were larger than a dog, but they did not match any known animals in the region. My father examined them closely, trying to find some logic in them. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured to himself, while I tried to remember if my grandfather had ever mentioned anything similar in his stories. Our routine on the ranch changed as the days went by. Everyone was more nervous, and any unusual noise put us on alert. The tension was palpable, and we began to speak in hushed tones, as if we feared something might be listening. We decided to reinforce the fences and secure the corral better, though deep down, we knew that if it really was the Chupacabras, our measures might not be enough. As our investigations continued, so did the attacks. One morning, we found another goat dead, with the same marks and completely drained of blood. Despair grew within us, and a feeling of helplessness overwhelmed us. It was as if we were fighting an invisible enemy, something we could not understand or stop. Each new attack reaffirmed the fear that my grandfather's stories had planted in us. My father decided that we should watch the corral at night to try to discover what was killing our animals. We took turns staying awake, armed with lanterns and an old rifle. The nights were long and filled with the whispers of the wind and shadows that seemed to move on their own. Every creak and noise made us jump, hoping to see the Chupacabras at any moment. The first night of vigilance was especially tense. The sky was clear, and the full moon illuminated the landscape, creating long and terrifying shadows. The trees around the corral seemed like giant sentinels, and the cold air chilled us to the bone. Sitting in silence, we listened to every sound, trying to identify anything out of the ordinary. The wind blew strongly, making the branches creak and the animals restless. As the hours passed, the tension increased. The lantern cast a weak and flickering light, barely enough to see a few meters ahead. The fear of the unknown kept us alert, and any movement in the darkness was enough to make us aim the rifle with trembling hands. My grandfather's stories echoed in my mind, heightening the feeling that something supernatural was about to happen. Finally, the first night passed without incident, but our tranquility was short-lived. The nights that followed were equally tense, and despite our lack of sight, the sense of surveillance persisted. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, and the fear of the unknown took hold of us. Every time an animal made a noise or a branch broke, panic seized us. We knew that something was stalking our ranch, something we could not see, but it was there, waiting. One night, while I was on guard, I heard a loud noise near the corral. My heart pounded as I approached with the lantern. Suddenly, I saw a large, dark shadow moving quickly among the trees. I raised the rifle, but the creature disappeared before I could aim. I knew I had seen something that was not normal. Fear took hold of me, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and decided to keep investigating. With each step I took, I felt the crunch of dry leaves under my feet, and the wind seemed to whisper warnings. The trees' shadows lengthened, creating shapes that my mind associated with monsters and nightmare creatures. The lantern's light trembled in my hand, reflecting my state of mind. When I reached the spot where I had seen the shadow, I found nothing. However, the air was thick with a sense of imminent danger. Suddenly, a thud behind me made me spin around. What I saw left me breathless. A dark, beastly figure fading into the trees, leaving a trail of disturbed leaves and broken branches. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I ran back to the corral, feeling like something was chasing me. When I arrived, I woke up my father and brothers, trying to explain what I had seen. Their faces reflected the same fear and confusion I felt. That night, we couldn't sleep, and the feeling that something terrible was stalking us grew stronger. We knew we had to be prepared for anything, and the presence of the Chupacabras became more real with each passing day. Shortly after that encounter, our guard dog, Max, disappeared. Max was a brave dog, always alert, and protected the ranch with his life. One morning, when we went out to do our usual chores, we noticed his absence. We called him repeatedly, but there was no response. Worry took hold of us, and a desperate search began. We scoured the ranch and the surrounding area, looking for any sign of Max. The day was overcast, and the atmosphere was oppressive. The trees seemed to close ranks around us, and the silence was almost deafening. Every corner of the ranch seemed full of shadows and invisible threats. Max's tracks disappeared a few meters from the corral, as if he had vanished into thin air. My father, with a somber expression, tried to remain calm. "We can't lose hope," he said, though the worry was evident in his eyes. We kept searching until nightfall, but found no trace of our faithful guardian. Max's disappearance increased our fear and confirmed our suspicions that something supernatural was stalking our farm. That night, Max's absence was palpable. Without his protective presence, the ranch felt more vulnerable than ever. My grandfather's stories about the Chupacabras and other creatures of the forest echoed in our minds. We gathered in the house, closing all the doors and windows, and lit candles and lanterns to keep the darkness at bay. The sense of imminent danger didn't leave us, and we knew we had to be prepared for the worst. Desperate for answers, we turned to Don Francisco, an elder in the village known for his knowledge of local legends. Don Francisco had lived his entire life in San Juan de las Montañas and was respected for his wisdom and connection to ancient traditions. When we arrived at his house, he greeted us with a grave look, as if he already knew the reason for our visit. We told him everything that had happened: the attacks on the livestock, Max's disappearance, and my close encounter with the mysterious creature. Don Francisco listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "What you describe matches the stories of the Chupacabras," he finally said, his voice filled with gravity. "It is a creature that does not belong to this world, and its presence always brings misfortune." Don Francisco advised us to perform a protection ritual to keep the Chupacabras away. He gave us a mixture of sacred herbs and taught us an ancient prayer that we had to recite every night. "These herbs have protective properties, and the prayer will invoke the guardian spirits," he explained. Although we felt skeptical, we were willing to try anything to protect our farm. That night, upon returning to the ranch, we prepared everything for the ritual. Tension and fear permeated the atmosphere. We followed Don Francisco's instructions in the letter, placing the herbs around the corral and reciting the prayer fervently. As we performed the ritual, we felt that each word and each gesture brought us closer to real protection against the unknown. That same night, we followed Don Francisco's instructions to the letter. We placed the sacred herbs around the corral, forming a circle of protection. The mix of aromas filled the air, creating a mystical and somewhat comforting atmosphere. We gathered in the center of the corral, and my father began to recite the ancient prayer Don Francisco had taught us. His voice, though firm, carried a tone of supplication. As my father recited the prayer, the rest of us held our lanterns high, illuminating the circle of herbs. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the ground, and the wind blew gently, as if responding to our call. Each word of the prayer seemed to resonate in the night's silence, and we felt a connection to something greater and older than ourselves. As the prayer continued, a sense of calm began to settle over us. It was as if the invisible forces surrounding us had heard our plea and were granting us their protection. However, we could not let our guard down. We knew that the Chupacabra was a cunning and dangerous creature, and we would need more than a ritual to keep it at bay. Faith and vigilance would be our best weapons. After completing the ritual, we remained silent for a moment, letting the peace we felt wash over us. Although we were not entirely sure of its effectiveness, we felt that at least we were doing something to protect ourselves. The atmosphere became more tranquil, and for the first time in weeks, we could sleep a little more peacefully. Still, the sense that something was lurking in the darkness never completely left us. The following nights passed without incident, and we began to believe that the ritual had worked. The atmosphere on the ranch became more relaxed, and the fear that had accompanied us for weeks began to dissipate. My siblings and I regained some normalcy in our lives, though we were always alert to any sign of danger. We believed we had discovered a solution, driving the Chupacabras away. During those days of relative peace, we continued to perform the protection ritual each night. It was a constant reminder of our fight against the unknown, as well as a way to keep hope alive. My father, who had been the most skeptical at first, had become a fervent believer in Don Francisco's teachings. Faith in the ancient traditions had united us even more as a family. However, the tranquility did not last long. A few weeks later, we found another animal dead, this time a calf, with the same marks and characteristics as the previous goats. The sense of terror returned to our family, and we knew that the Chupacabras hadn't left. The peace we had felt quickly vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of imminent danger. Despair grew within us, and the feeling of helplessness overwhelmed us. It was as if we were fighting an invisible enemy, something we could not understand or stop. Each new attack reaffirmed the fear that my grandfather's stories had planted in us. We knew we had to be stronger and more united than ever to face this threat. The battle against the Chupacabras was far from over, and we had to prepare for what was to come. We decided that we could not continue living in fear. We organized a more intense search and ventured into the forest, where I had seen the shadow that night. Armed with more determination than ever, we explored every corner but found nothing conclusive. However, the sense of danger persisted, and we knew we had to be prepared for anything. It was a battle between rationality and the inexplicable, and we were determined not to give up. The nights became more vigilant and tense. We continued with the protection ritual and took turns guarding the corral, this time with more care and planning. We set traps and signals around the perimeter, hoping to catch or at least alert us to the creature's presence. Every creak in the darkness made us grip the rifle more tightly, keeping our nerves on edge. The tension was palpable, but so was our determination. One night, during one of our vigils, we heard an unusual noise near the corral. It was a low, guttural sound, unlike anything we had heard before. My father and I approached cautiously, our lanterns pointing in the direction of the sound. Suddenly, a figure of the Chupacabras appeared before us, its eyes glowing with a supernatural intensity. It was a terrifying sight, but we were ready to face it. With courage, my father aimed the rifle and fired, but the creature disappeared into the darkness before the bullet could reach it. That confrontation made it clear to us that the Chupacabras were not a myth, but a terrifying reality. Despite our failure to capture it, the experience taught us to resist fear. We redoubled our efforts to protect the ranch, strengthening our defenses and remaining ever vigilant. Over time, the attacks ceased, and life on the ranch returned to a relative normal. However, The lesson learned and the memory of those nights of terror remained etched in our minds forever. We knew we had faced something beyond our understanding, and although the fear remained latent, so did our strength and unity as a family. Over time, life on the ranch returned to a relative normality, but the experience with the Chupacabras left an indelible mark on our lives. As I grew older, life led me far from San Juan de las Montañas. I moved to the city in search of new opportunities and a different life. However, I never forgot the nights of vigilance and the stories my grandfather and father had told me. We sold the ranch after my father's death. It was a difficult but necessary decision. My mother, unable to handle it alone, dispersed us, her children, across various locations. Although I had left rural life behind, the memory of the ranch and the experiences we had there always accompanied me. The Chupacabra stories became tales I shared with my own children, keeping the memory of my family and our traditions alive. From time to time, I heard news about the old ranch. Some new owners claimed to have seen the Chupacabras or found livestock mysteriously dead with the same unmistakable marks. Every time I heard these stories, a chill ran down my spine. I knew that my grandfather's stories and my youthful experiences were not just legends. The ranch, now in the hands of others, remained a place of mystery and fear. Although it is no longer part of our lives, the Chupacabra's legacy and the nights of terror we spent there remain a reminder that there are things in this world that defy our understanding. The stories of the ranch and the Chupacabras endure, tying us to a history we will never forget. I really hope you like this tale. I am thrilled to share these stories with you. Share this video with others so that we can keep growing, and more stories can reach more people. Kindly provide your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. It will aid in my further development. If you like the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Many thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.